Okay, so let's begin with some um, motivation prayers. Yeah. So get comfortable and let's do some placement meditation to focus our attention and then spend some time with motivation. Mm. So then, if one likes, visualize oneself surrounded by all sentient beings, beginning with one's father of this life to one's right and behind you. So imagine him sitting next to you, and then all your uncles, grandfathers, male cousins, and family members, friends sitting to your right and behind you, and then to your left, your mother of this life, and all your female family and friends sitting to your left and behind you. And feel how you're interconnected with them. You depend upon them, they depend upon you. And then think of those whom you're most prone to become angry with, seated directly in front of you, facing towards you. Those whom you tend to dislike. And think about how they're also the same as you and wishing to have happiness and wishing to be free from suffering. And then briefly bring to mind all the other sentient beings that exist. Imagine them all seated around you, as vast as space in human form, practicing together with you. So then within this context of thinking of how we are related to all sentient beings, we live amongst all sentient beings and dependence upon all sentient beings, and we can generate a positive motivation Um, mm, so think of one's own difficulties and problems that one wishes to be free of, different forms of suffering one oneself experiences and wants to be free from, and recognize how all the other sentient beings, our friends, enemies, strangers, are all the same and experiencing various forms of suffering and wanting to be free from them, and try to generate compassion for oneself, compassion for others. And for that purpose, then I'll engage in this practice of reflecting and meditating on the Buddhist teachings on emptiness. And then think of one's own potential for well-being and happiness. Infinite positive, having infinite positive qualities up to a full enlightenment, and the same how all the other sentient beings, friends, enemies, and strangers, have the same potential and the same aspiration to have lasting well-being and peace and happiness. So then try to generate love for oneself, love for others, wishing oneself and others to have happiness and well-being. And then for that reason, again, thinking, therefore meditate on the Buddhist teachings on the wisdom of emptiness. So then, if you like, you can visualize in the space in front of you also the field of refuge. Shakyamuni Buddha or another, His Holiness Dalai Lama or another teacher who represents or embodies the Buddha Dharma Sangha. And then generate, the mind of refuge, wishing to be free from, for oneself and others, wishing to be free from the suffering of samsara, and having faith that the Buddha Dharma Sangha have the ability to protect one from that. So if you like, you can recite this refuge in bodhicitta prayer. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of meditating on the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my two collections of listening to the Dharma, meditating on the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. So today's session, will be kind of a review, but the main aim is to try to um, try to work with bringing this kind of methods of thinking about dependent arising and emptiness into like um, usefulness in our daily lives, dealing with our own kind of mental turmoil and challenges. Um, yeah. So, first, again, just sit quietly for a moment, and then let's see. Then we'll think of some of the mental challenges that we face, either difficult relationships with other people, or self-doubt, or anxiety, worry, fear. Um, yeah, whatever. So first, sit quietly for a moment, just relax. So then ask yourself, what are the kind of main some of the main situations or difficulties in your life these days that bring kind of disturbance to the mind, anxiety, or, irritation, or whatever. So then the first thing to reflect on as you think of those kind of afflictive emotions that arise is is it true that they arise from primarily a selfish concern? Mhm. And also from grasping at self, an exaggerated sense of grasping, or grasping at a self in an exaggerated way. That's grasping at oneself. Do they entail or arise from grasping at oneself as being like kind of concrete, independently existing from one's own side? It's kind of exaggerated sense, exaggerated strong sense of like a self that exists independently of anything else. It's just real there from its own side. So you kind of have to go back and forth between here again, thinking of that, the things that are bothering you, affective emotions that arise, irritation, or anger, or jealousy, fear, afflicted fear, and then checking how the seem to grasp at oneself in the midst of that emotion, how the self appears, how I seem to assume the self exists, and then go back to having a sense of what's disturbing one's mind, and then look again at how the self seems to exist and check, is it true that they seem to arise from selfish concern, and then the root of selfish concern being this exaggeratedly strong grasping at an I existing from its own side. So reflect on that for about 5 minutes. So then think in a general way about how, yeah, that the I that experiences the afflictive emotion is a dependent arising, right? Exists in dependence upon causes and conditions. You know, it arises from moment to moment in dependence upon various causes and conditions, an infinite chain of causes and conditions that exists in independence upon parts, all the parts of one's body, all the parts of one's mind, especially. And then especially how one exists in dependence upon being imputing I upon this collection of parts, existing in that way. So in general, try to think about, you know, within the context of, you know, the afflictive emotion arising, something troubling your mind arising, then with a corner of your mind, try to look at how the I, how we grasp the eyes in an exaggerated way, and then try to think about it as a dependent arising and see if that helps. And then if you like, you can also either just keep doing that, thinking about oneself as a dependent arising in different ways, or you can also try to do the more formal analysis of looking to see, doing the 4-point analysis. So again, beginning with a stronger sense of how the mind is disturbed in different situations, how afflictive emotions arise. Then we have is there a heightened sense of, grasping at a concretely existing self? And then the 4-point analysis. So getting a sense of how we grasp it, an exaggerated sense of self, and then seeing the two possibilities. If I exist in that way, then either I exist as inherently one with the aggregates, and body and mind, or inherently different and separate from them. There's no third possibility. So if I don't exist as inherently one with or inherently different from, and that I doesn't exist in that way at all. And then the third step, analyzing to see if the self exists as inherently one with the aggregates. And then if it does, there's a problem of, because the aggregates are many in number, the self is also many in number, that then the aggregates aren't possessions of the self. The self isn't a possessor of the aggregates. And then the self and the aggregates shouldn't appear as two different things to the mind, because they're exactly the same thing, and so forth. And then the fourth step, thinking if is the self's, well, also another point is that the self isn't findable anywhere within the aggregates. And then the fourth step, if the self exists as inherently separate from the aggregates, then it should be findable, completely independent of the body and mind. As if we put the body and mind off to one side of the house and search for the self in a different part, it should be findable, but it's not. Anyway, so if you like, then you can try to apply that kind of more formal way of thinking to analyzing how the self exists. But if that seems too complex, then just think about, again, oneself as a dependent arising. And again, the main thing is to check, does it help to, reduce or eliminate the strength of the intensity of um, the afflictive emotion that's arising, and right, that arises in different situations. So meditate like that for about 4 or 5 minutes. So then just relax your attention for a couple minutes before we continue. Okay, so let's continue. Yeah. So we'll continue in the same vein, thinking about things which disturb our mind in different ways, either through attachment, kind of some kind of attachment on the one side or some kind of aversion on the other side. This time, instead of focusing on the I, how the self, oneself appears, then we'll focus on of the object of our afflictive emotions, either another person that we find irritating or that we're attached to, or you know, um, an object, or an inanimate object um, that we primarily relate through, in terms of like, could be having fear of a disease, then how do we think about that, that illness or fear of a certain kind of situation befalling us? Then the object of that mind, how do we think about that situation? So then see how, also when we have afflictive emotion arises, when we have afflictive emotions arising, how we not only grasp at ourself in an exaggerated way, but look to see if do we grasp at other objects, other people, or other things as existing from their own side. Mhm. And then try to use the same technique that one uses with regard to oneself. So with regard to the object of one's kind of afflictive emotions, and try to, first of all, try to think of them as a dependent arising in different ways. Do they depend or exist in dependence upon causes and conditions? Dependence upon infinite, web of causes and conditions. Do they exist in dependence upon parts? Do they exist especially in dependence upon being imputed by the mind? As this is that, this is good, this is bad. And then see if that helps to kind of reduce the intensity of grasping at the object of one's afflictive emotions. And then for a few minutes, if one likes, we'll try to do the more formal analysis, this 4-point analysis, identifying the object of negation, ascertaining the two possibilities, and seeing if this object of one's, the object of one's afflictive emotions, do they exist within as one with their basis of imputation, as inherently the same as or inherently one with their basis of imputation, or inherently different from. Analyze those two possibilities and then see that they don't exist inherently from their own side at all in the slightest. Or just keep thinking about the dependent arising in different ways. And then finally, just try to expand your kind of view out a broader and more broader, encompassing kind of from oneself, one's own mind, one's body, and other people, other sentient beings, throughout one's country, one's continent, planet, the entire universe, and also all the inanimate phenomena, the earth, the water, the air. And think about how all these phenomena are the same as being dependently arisen and are all dependent arisings, and thereby all one taste and being empty of inherent existence, or empty of existing from their own side. And yet still function as an interconnected way. Let's try to generate that view of all phenomena being empty of inherent existence because they're dependently arisen. Dependence upon causes and conditions, and dependence upon infinite parts, and dependence upon imputation by the mind. Mm. So you can relax your attention there. So we'll stop with the meditation at that point. So then let's dedicate briefly. So think of whatever merit we've created through this whole module on the wisdom of emptiness. We can rejoice in our own efforts and the efforts of the others in the group. And then rejoice in the merit created by all the Shakyamuni Buddha who first taught this kind of wisdom of emptiness and then arising. And then all the Buddhist saints through the ages who've passed this teaching down to us today. We can rejoice in all their merit and wisdom. And then rejoice in all the merit and wisdom generated by all the other holy beings and all different traditions and all the merits and positive energy created by all of the ordinary sentient beings like ourselves. So all this merit gathered together, we can dedicate in general, may all sentient beings who suffer like ourselves be free from every form of suffering. Free of especially negative karma, afflictive emotions, and hunger, thirst, loneliness, depression, and violence and abuse, confusion, and then may the world be free of war, famine, natural disasters, oppression, and so forth. And then may all sentient beings, ourselves and others, enjoy every form of well-being and happiness, from having enough food and clothes, shelter, prosperity, wealth, sustenance, and having friendship, education, loving, supportive families and friends, having peace and wisdom, insight, and then all the other positive qualities, compassion, kindness, generosity. And especially may ourselves and all sentient beings develop on the spiritual path up to full enlightenment. And then for this purpose, may all of our teachers have long and stable lives, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And may Buddhist and other authentic spiritual teachings that benefit sentient beings flourish and remain for a long time in the world. And then bring to mind any other prayers or aspirations you'd like to make. So especially may all those your virtuous prayers be fulfilled. And in short, may all be auspicious. Okay, so thank you all. Yeah, and especially thanks to Ocean of Compassion Center and yeah, Mary Ellen and Oris for hosting.
Thank you so much, Venerable Exo.
Thank you, Venerable Exo.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you,
Thank you, Venerable Exo, Mary Ellen and Urs.
Thanks, everyone, so much.